Hey YouTube, Kevin Clear here with a knife video for you. And this is, I will say this is not exactly a knife video. I've got a few knives here that you can check out. There is the Zero Tolerance 0808. I got here the Real Steel H9 Taken. These are to demonstrate blade shapes, by the way, for this video, which is what I really want to talk about is what knife is best for an emergency. I do have a couple of other examples to demonstrate a very fine pointed tip. This is the CRKT Tie-Tac and the very well-known Paramilitary 2. So what we want to talk about here is what knife, and this is a question that I get asked a lot. I get asked in comments, I get asked on reviews, I get asked in discussion videos, and even in the forums this comes up an awful lot. Someone will say, Kevin, is this knife suitable for my job as a police officer or an EMT? Is this a good defensive knife? They're always asking about how is this knife going to serve me in some emergency situation, okay? And my response is, well, the reality is you probably won't need a knife in an emergency situation. Number two, the main thing, and this will kind of be the main point of this video, what you have in your pocket is not high on the list of what's going to help you in a real emergency, okay? So the first thing that I want to talk about along these lines is adrenaline response, okay? So what's going to happen to you when something bad happens? You get in a car accident, you witness a car accident, you or someone close to you has some kind of a medical emergency, a heart attack or a bad fall and a broken bone, or fill in the blank with anything else, drowning, whatever. Someone is going to attack you and they threaten your life or they pull a gun on you. Your adrenaline is going to start pumping into your body. Now, when that happens, your heart rate's going to go up, your fine motor skills are going to go out the window, and your ability to think clearly and critically is going to be severely diminished, okay? So, number one, you need to be aware, and just knowing that that's going to happen to you is extremely helpful. All right, as someone who, in addition to my job as a minister, I am a volunteer firefighter, I respond to lots of emergency situations. You need to know your adrenaline is going to shoot up through the roof, okay? Now, knowing that, I adjust my behavior. So I make sure that when I'm driving on the way to a fire call, I drive very slowly and methodically and carefully. Why? Because I know adrenaline is pumping through my system and there's a better chance than normal that I'm going to do something stupid, okay? In fact, a lot of the guys, you guys know those Fitbits are really popular now, and it's interesting, I've seen the Fitbit charts for a lot of the other guys on the fire department, and when there's a call, guess what happens to their blood pressure and their heart rate? Right? It just takes off. That's part of the adrenaline response. So number one, you need to know that you're going to respond, your body is going to respond with a spike in adrenaline, which is going to cause a whole series of things to go on in your body. Okay, it's essentially your body preparing to fight or flight. Now, the problem is you don't want to fight or flight. Maybe you need to check for how safe a situation is. Maybe you need to look for a pulse on a patient. Maybe you need to, get yourself and your family to a safe distance. Whatever. Maybe you need to figure out, hey, where's a bandage? Maybe you need to call 911. Right? All of those things require, some thought and some ability to behave rationally and carefully, but the adrenaline pumping through your system is going to make it difficult for you to do that. So that's the first thing you need to kind of be aware of, is the adrenaline response that's going to happen. Now, here's the second thing that you're going to need to think about then. How do I fight that adrenaline response? Well, there are a few things you can do. Take a breath, calm down. Okay, where am I? What's going on? What's just happened? Take stock of the situation. All of those things will allow, your heart rate to come down and your thinking to kind of recover a little bit. But remember that you're there in the moment, which means that's going to be very difficult to do. So try to take a breath, try to get your head back on straight before you go making any rash decisions, unless the decision is just to run away. Then go ahead and run, okay? But that's one of the things you need to think about. You're going to respond with a spike in adrenaline. Now, the main thing to do to combat that is to train. All right. How do you know that you're going to be able to do what you need to do when you're not able to think clearly and when your adrenaline's pumping, when your heart rate is up and your fine motor skills aren't great? The only way you know that you're going to be able to do what you need to do is because you've done it thousands of times before, and it's purely now rote memory. It's ingrained in your muscles, in your brain, that there's no thinking, there's no calming. You don't need any of that calming down because you just know this is step one, this is step two, this is, I just know how to respond. Okay? That means of all the things that I'm going to say in this video, the most important is not, what knife I recommend. By the way, this would not be the one. But the most important thing I'm going to say is get training, okay? Because the main thing that's going to impact you, but let's be honest, the biggest emergency situation that most of us are going to come across is a medical emergency, okay? It's going to be someone who has had a heart attack, someone's been in a car accident, someone has fallen and severely injured themselves, someone's been hit by a car or some other, heavy foreign object. So if you know that's the most common thing, probably if you're watching this video and you don't have first aid CPR training, that would be a good place to start. Okay, because that training is going to be the main thing that allows you to work through that adrenaline response. Now, because it's been so ingrained into you how to respond to an emergency, you're going to just do it automatically without having to stop and think. Okay, so training is critical. If you're thinking of a defensive situation, again, training is critical. Whether it's some kind of martial arts training, whether it's weapons training, whether it's the regular training schedule with your handgun or other personal defensive devices, training is going to be probably the most paramount. And CPR, of all the different kinds of training you could think of, basic first aid and CPR are probably the most helpful. Okay, so training, number one. Then consider this. All right, I'm trying to kind of convey some things here that I think would be helpful. As a firefighter, if the pager goes off right now, I'm going to run to my car. I'm going to get in the car, start the car. I'm going to drive to the fire hall. I'm going to put my bunker gear on. I'm going to get on a truck, and we're going to go to the scene. Okay. Think about all the time that's involved in that. So from the time I first hear that there's an emergency and my adrenaline kicks in, I've got, anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, okay, where I can kind of mentally prepare for what's coming. If you are on scene and the emergency is happening to you or to someone close to you, you don't have that luxury. Okay, you don't have that time to think and plan that us as firefighters have, that the police officers have, as the EMTs have. That's not available to you. Okay, so that means the whole wait time. The whole calming down and getting training is more important to the individual that's on the scene in the moment than, in fact, it even is to us. Because, as I say, I can think through what I'm going to do when I get to a scene in that time that we're driving there. All right. So we talk about what knife or what tool is going to be most helpful to you. Well, the reality is this is going to be your most useful tool. Okay. Call 911, get some help coming. At least then if this is something I can't deal with, which often it is. Okay. If someone's had a heart attack, what are you going to do? Okay, you can do CPR, but that's about it. They got to get to the hospital and you need an ambulance. So a cell phone and a charged cell phone is probably number one on the list, way above a knife. Okay, so, as we've kind of talked about what you have with you, number one is training and the ability to calm yourself down. Number two is a cell phone. Number three is going to be a first aid kit. Okay, or whatever tools you're able to find around you. Okay, I had a guy. I was not working in the capacity as a firefighter. I was just I was sitting at a stoplight waiting to go through the light. I'm walking across the road. This guy comes out of the bank and just collapses onto the sidewalk. I'm like, oh man. So I go through the light. I couldn't leave my car there because I knew the ambulance was going to come right down the road I was on. So I had to wait till the light changed, go through the light, pull over, quickly run out, go check on the guy. Luckily, there was another firefighter that showed up about the same time, so we were able to sort of check the guy out, The people in the bank, luckily, the people in the bank brought out some towels that we could use for bandaging. In the meantime, he had said, he was still responding, and one of the things we did was keep him talking. He said, I have a first aid kit. So I go to check the first aid kit in the trunk. There's literally nothing useful in the first aid kit. Okay, you couldn't even put a bandage on a small cut, and there weren't tweezers for a sliver, for crying out loud. There was nothing of any value in that first aid kit. So if you have a first aid kit, make sure that it's stocked well and that it's got stuff that you can use, and make sure that you know how to use that stuff, okay? You don't want to be opening the first aid kit and seeing it all for the first time and going, oh good, now what do I do with this? You want to, when you go and buy a first aid kit, open it up, make sure that you know what everything is in there, what everything is that's in there, how to use everything. And you can also do a check then and say, hey, there's not enough Band-Aids in here, or there should be a pair of scissors, and you can add that yourself, okay? So, notice we've done all of this and we're still not to a knife. Finally, we're still not to a knife yet. The other most important thing is that your attitude, or in your approach to daily life, is critical. Okay, being aware of your surroundings, of what's going on, and the potentials for danger is absolutely key. And I remember being warned about this when we were doing traffic, okay? The guy who is the main instructor for, doing traffic control said, what do you think is the most important thing to remember when you're directing traffic? And we said, well, where the traffic is, and what the guy on the radio said. We gave all kinds of answers, and he said, no, that's all wrong. The most important thing to keep in the back of your mind is where you are going to dive, right? And what he meant is you will, if you do this for any length of time, you'll be standing there with your stop sign, and someone is not going to see you, and they're going to drive right through where you're standing. And so you better be prepared. You better be aware of what's happening so that you know, holy cow, that 18-wheeler does not see me, and he's going to run right over me unless I get out of the way. Okay, awareness is absolutely critical, whether it be awareness if you come across an emergency situation, most importantly, awareness to avoid that in the first place. Okay, now finally, what knife is best for an emergency? Well, you guys probably know the answer to this before I even say it, but the most well-suited, sorry about that, guys. I didn't realize the knife that I wanted was not right here on the table in front of me. The most well-suited blade for an emergency situation is a fixed blade. Doesn't matter whether that's a defensive situation, doesn't matter whether it's a medical emergency, whatever the case may be. If you're in a car, okay, you've got a glass breaker here, but a fixed blade is going to be the most helpful in an emergency situation, because that's all I need to do to deploy it. Okay, you get a knife like this that you have in your pocket, and I've broken this in a bit, but what if you miss the thumb set, it doesn't all the way deploy, and you go to there are a lot of things that can happen if you have to do something before you can use your blade. So there you go, guys. Those are my thoughts about what knife is best for an emergency situation. The reality is whatever's in your pocket is secondary to your attitude and your previous preparedness for that situation through training and through making sure that you have emergency responders coming and all of that kind of stuff. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll talk to you soon.